I want to share a statement from a male therapist that I found online. Is it wrong for me to apologize for my gender working with female clients having relationship problems? When women tell me about their relationship issues, communication problems with men, I have frequently said, "You have to understand something about us men." Then lean forward with a hushed tone, say, "We're dumb. We don't communicate well. We know how to do things, but not talk about our feelings." Now, I found that on a reputable male therapist's website newsletter, but I couldn't track it back to its source. So do what you will with that caveat. But when we hear male therapist statements like that, we gotta ask, what happened to you? Even with many male therapists, this is often what male clients are stepping into. If this is how male communication is framed by people already in practice, the question I have is, how did you end up that way? I answer my own question by saying that it's the educational and training pipeline of the students before they even enter the workforce. So in part 2 here, we'll begin where part 1 left off. If therapy is already heavily female dominated, how is the pipeline into the profession shaped? This means looking closely at universities' training programs and cultural pressures that govern who gets through the door and who thrives once they're inside. I'm going to throw up some images, some layovers here. So as I go through, just have a look at them. But there is really way too much of this aspect to cover even in a deep dive right here. But the story here is not just about the demographics. It's about how the entire system, education and professional, produce themselves. And how a culture of academia ensures that the field of counseling and therapy continues to tilt in the same direction. Let's start with the raw structure of graduate programs. Psychology, counseling, social work programs are all overwhelmingly filled with female students, right? We saw that in part 1. Often 75 to 80, some of them even 90% or more. And that is not accidental. Many programs actively market themselves with language around empathy, nurturing, emotional resilience, all qualities that are socially coded as feminine, which attracts women and subtly filters out men who may not see themselves being represented. On top of that, these programs rely heavily on practicum and internship placements, where evaluation can be as much about perceived fit and professional identity as hard skills. This is where ideological pressures begin to show. Faculty and mentorship play a huge role in who advances. Let me lay some layovers here. I'm just going to look through my notes right here, but let me just run through some of these. So here we've got University of Michigan. We can see an image of their current clinical doctoral students here. This one right here, Columbia University. Here's a group shot of their students recently. Here's a screenshot of what appears to be Teachers College and an online, looks like maybe a Zoom call of their students or some form of what is this? Developmental studies group. Here is George Washington University, their clinical student group, right? And when I talk about the pipeline, this right here also, the advertisement that goes into bringing students into clinical programs. Here's one from Fielding. Here's another one from, I forget exactly where this one is from. Let me zoom in here just a moment. I forget. Oh, this one is from Jackson University, it looks like. Jackson State University. Right, so you get the idea. Faculty and mentorship, again, they play a huge role in who advances. Actually, here, let's take a look at some of the faculty. So here are some faculty shots. This one, Clinical Psychology and Neuroscience, University of Tennessee. Here's Fordham University, meet the psychology law research lab, so not clinical here, but still psychology nonetheless. Here is Arizona State University, their School of Counseling and Counseling Psychology. Here's their faculty. So when men make up only a fraction of the student body, they often struggle to find mentors who reflect their experience. Let me give a personal anecdote or a personal experience here in just a moment. Most clinical supervisors and professors are female, right? And we can see these by some of the images of the faculty that I've put up. So for those of you who may not be familiar, the way that it typically works is when you're applying for generally any doctoral degree, whether it be physics or psychology, what happens is you apply for that program, but also to work with one of their specific professors to do your research. That's why you'll see sometimes, is this professor accepting students? That means they may only take one student every year, every 2 years, depending on their needs, their research, funding, all those kinds of things. So when you apply to a doctoral program, you're not just applying to that program, but to work with a specific mentor, that advisor, for the duration of your 3, maybe 6, or even 8 years. And to do their research. The benefit that professor gets is you are doing that research for their research for them and with them, right? So when 80%, 70% of clinical psychology professors are women, what type of students do you think they're bringing in to do their research with them? Again, so most clinical supervisors and professors are female, which means that the male perspective is underrepresented, even at that entry-level point pipeline into their programs, not just in numbers, but in shaping the curriculum itself. Faculty influence extends even beyond the content. It also frames what counts as professional many times. Students are socialized into a culture where conformity to certain values, often progressive, identity-centered, all of that is expected. This institutional gatekeeping matters, I think, a lot because it determines who stays in the pipeline. A male student who questions certain maybe therapeutic frameworks or maybe resists his professor's ideological beliefs may very well be flagged as a bad fit, thereby jeopardizing recommendations for internship or even approval of his dissertation research and whether or not he gets to complete his degree. Gatekeeping is not just academic performance. Keep that in mind. It's cultural performance because students are 100% under the control of their advisors and their program chairs. That's the professors that they're working with for the duration of their doctoral studies. You don't need just to show that DSM criteria. Students also need to align with the prevailing attitudes of the program and of those advisors and chairs and research people at those institutions. This creates a subtle filter in which those who think differently, whether it's politics, cultural, or in terms of gendered approaches, are less likely to survive that in training and academic process. And that's if they're even accepted into the program at all in the first place. The result is a professional funnel that starts wide and narrows very quickly, producing not just more women than men, but also a certain type of therapist. The profession ends up dominated by individuals who share similar ideological leanings and academic socialization. And ultimately, it's not just about gender. It's about worldview and conformity of beliefs. And because many of these therapists in training eventually become supervisors, faculty, or maybe even program directors, or they even own their own therapy business, the cycle reinforces itself across generations. I think I mentioned maybe in part 1, this is expected to go on for decades. Now men, especially men who think differently from the prevailing norms, they rarely get the chance to climb into those roles. Now, let's quickly tie this to the theme of authority in academia and professional mental health services. More than just a numbers game, the shaping of this pipeline is the cultural foundation of therapy itself. If the programs are overwhelmingly female, if the faculty are overwhelmingly female, and if the ideological filters are overwhelmingly narrow, then the therapists who graduate into the workforce carry that imprinted authority with them. And that's how they end up defining the cultural narrative around therapy. And that's how we get 80% female therapists. And even the men are often suspect, such as the one who I read that statement about, or from, a few moments ago. And what happens is every male client who later walks into therapy is stepping into it, often unbeknownst to him, often stepping into a structure built long before he sits on that couch. It's a structure that reflects the cultural pipeline of universities more than the diversity of the people that are seeking help. This framing naturally leads into part 3, wherein I will move this discussion from academic pressures into the ideological stakes when therapy meets politics and activism in the real world.